So good afternoon, everyone, and I have the pleasure of being with Dr. Christian Komor. Dr. Christian Komor is an independent candidate for governor of Colorado, and not only is he an independent candidate of governor of Colorado, he's also the innovation advocate candidate for climate change. I believe one of the big things on your agenda is carbon capture or carbon removal. Is carbon removal and carbon capture the same thing? Is my first question.
That is a great question because a lot of people get them confused. And by the way, it's a pleasure to be here, Coach. Carbon capture is when we basically filter the release of carbon from factories. So it's basically a filtration system preventing the release of carbon. Well, what we're worried about is we already have 900 gigatons of carbon in the troposphere around the Earth. And that's what's causing climate change. Unfortunately, it's not going anywhere. The Earth eventually will be able to relocate that carbon, which is now a gas, back to the Earth as a solid, which is what it originally was. It's a closed carbon system. We've transmuted the form of the carbon from a solid to a gas. The Earth can't do this very quickly. It does it in Earth time, which is thousands of years before we have those, before the Earth can take care of the problem that we've caused, by and large. What we're seeing now is we're seeing environmental feedbacks starting, where, for instance, as the Earth heats up due to the increased carbon gas in the atmosphere and other greenhouse gases, like, as everyone knows, that we're losing snowpack and ice, and as we lose permafrost from underneath the permafrost, we're getting the release of methane, which is an even more potent greenhouse gas. So it's creating like a cycle. The more the Earth heats, the more melting we get, the more release of the methane we get, and the more methane we get in the atmosphere, it joins together with carbon and other greenhouse gases to increase the heat on the planet. By the mid 2030s, the projection is, if we just follow the trajectory of the way things are going, the Earth itself, the Earth systems that we will have changed, will become the primary driver of climate change. So it will no longer be human beings in charge. At that point, things will be out of control. They'll be in God's hands. We won't have the tools or technology to do anything about it. So we've got to move very quickly to remove carbon. Carbon's the easiest of those greenhouse gases for us to remove, but we have to do it at large scale, and we have to do it quickly. So anyone who's running for governor or really any office right now should be telling their constituents that. I mean, this is something that people need to know. There's a lot of information has been withheld from the public, and there's various theories about why that's happened, but we need to get the information out there. It's irresponsible to be running for political office right now and not have your eye on the climate change ball.
And so with that said, and obviously people do have their eye on the climate change bubble. What you're saying is one step in particular, and we're literally 4 years. You talk about 2030, we're 4 years away from 2030. And so you're running for governor, you get elected as governor of Colorado, and you say my number one priority, and what I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but I'm saying let's just hypothetically say my number one priority is to remove carbon from the atmosphere. Now you've got one state, you're in control of one state that if we don't take these steps in all 50 states, and the deadline is only 4 years away, what are the consequences? And I understand the earth is heating. We all understand that. We all see it, but there's so much denial of the problem, and there's so many various solutions that people keep presenting. Then we're talking about, now you're talking about a pretty pragmatic solution that we take one step at a time. I believe you're essentially saying the first step is carbon capture. There is a difference between carbon capture.
That's direct air carbon removal, or DACR.
Direct air carbon removal. So how would you address that in Colorado on your first 100 days as governor of Colorado?
Yeah, you're alluding to some really important ideas there. We, in our platform, of course, we also, of course, need to attend to other issues: clean air, clean water, corporate accountability, homelessness, veterans, education, public safety, especially in our schools. So we've got a 15-point or 15-plank platform to take care of the needs of the people of Colorado, in addition to climate change. But that's got to be kind of our first up thing. And as you were alluding to there, we're going to need I think of it like in World War II, if FDR had said, "Hey, we got a Nazi problem over in Europe. How about if the state militias go over and get some guys together with guns and go fight?" We would have failed. We obviously had a rapid mobilization after Pearl Harbor, and we sequestered the companies that were needed. The Defense Production Act went through, and we were able to come together and mobilize as a large, cohesive effort. That's what we need here, and we need it pretty much on that scale. And the risks that we're facing are much, much greater. In World War II, we're facing a totalitarian regime. Here we're facing pretty much an increase in everything that we're seeing now: wildfires, floods, aberrant weather patterns. But as these disasters continue to pile on one after the other, we're going to lose our ability. It's already cost climate change. It's already cost our country $5 trillion since the 1970s. So we need a concerted effort. Well, our plan is to start this in Colorado, that we can be the spark. Our plan is to set up 4 direct air carbon removal plants. And they're actually very simple. They're just big fan that draws in large amounts of air, and an absorbent material that it draws the air across this absorbent material, which pulls the carbon out, and then it has to be heated, and then eventually, the good thing is what we'll be doing almost inadvertently, but actually by design, we'll be creating a whole new industrial sector. With recovered carbon, we can make bridges, buildings, all kinds of infrastructure items. We can make jet fuel, polymers, even for those who are concerned about plastics, we can make biodegradable plastic, which would then solve our plastic problem. And it sounds like science fiction, but science fiction is actually what we need right now, because, as you pointed out, the 2030s are unbelievably close.
They're extremely close.
Yep. But so was Adolf Hitler. He was at the shores of England, and things were looking really bad at a certain point, and it required a major mobilization. And that's what we should be seeing now. Unfortunately, energies are getting scattered. So one of the things I'm telling people is it's too soon to be thinking about electric cars and worried about your individual carbon footprint, it's going to make no difference if we reduce our emissions right now. There's already too much of this, what's called legacy carbon, in the atmosphere. We're already sunk. We're like on the Titanic, and we've already hit the iceberg, and the ship is sinking. And the people up in first class, they are already scrambling to divest their assets. They've pushed for our government to deregulate industries, the fossil fuel industries. They're selling off their stock. You ask, why would someone be continuing to burn fossil fuels when the ship is sinking? They're gathering resources. There's all this interest in going to Mars and buying Greenland. So there's a flight of the elite happening right now that I think people are starting to perceive. And the rest of us down in fourth class are going to get left behind. Our only chance, our lifeboat, is to go after carbon removal. And if we have our energy scattered around, maybe we should do this or that or the other, but we're going to be like that example of the sending militias to fight Hitler. It's just not going to work.
And that was really a great analogy. The way you used it is that it would be too little, too late. And we, in a way, like you said, we did it entirely different in World War II. There was a lot of government put in place a lot of really effective, extremely powerful initiatives. Like you said, the act that enabled the factories to build military equipment, and we fought them all hard. And then came like a part of your governor's race is education. Do we is it hopeful to believe that we can educate our children to take a better stance on this whole situation with the environment and many other things, or are we really that close to the deadline, 4 years away?
I'm afraid we're really that close to the deadline. Not 4 years away. When you do the math, it ends up to be 7 to 10 years, if we're lucky, and if we were slowing down emissions. But our emissions have actually, since 2025, have sped up, and it varies from year to year, so it's hard to tell. But we're definitely not slowing down the additional carbon that we're adding to that 900 gigatons, which is already an overload. So at this point, things are just getting worse. Yeah, I think it's really, kids are spending their fortune going to college to study climate change, and it's going to be too late. We need action now. I would not be running for governor if this was next election cycle. It would be too late. There'd be no point. The fight is now. Same thing again as World War II. You couldn't wait for 4 years. There was no time left to wait. Thank God. I mean, it was a horrible event, but Pearl Harbor it motivated us as a population. We don't have that kind of motivator. We're not as smart as, unfortunately, as frogs in water. It's a common misnomer to believe that the common concept that frogs will stay in a pot of water as it heats up and eventually they'll boil to death. They won't. As soon as it gets uncomfortable, they'll hop out. We are staying in that hothouse, that hot pot, the hothouse Earth. We're still acting like, oh, we can tolerate this, we can get through this. But when you have force 9 hurricanes, you don't get through those. When you have storms that can level a city, you don't get through those. And things are moving exponentially in that direction.
They are. We see those storms happening more and more often. And then comes the argument, the other side of the argument, which is what we always focus on. We're not looking to argue. I'm never looking to argue. I'm looking to come to solutions. But then comes the other side of the argument that this is all hype, that this is all unnecessary to even consider. At the moment in time, we have a president who's adamantly opposed to anything to do with real climate change reform. And like you said, we're losing time, precious time. There's a sense of there is an immediate urgency that we act on these things now. And the reality is, on a big scale, when you get elected, hopefully you get elected, you'll be the one to get that point across that we need to move quickly. Like you said, it was the next election cycle, you wouldn't even run. I think you said that it may just be too late. How do we get this point across all across the country that I'm 100% all about the environment and getting this thing straightened out because I'm concerned for my kids, not just myself. And I see just what you're saying. I see all these enormous weather events happening. I'm 60 years old. I've never seen so many catastrophic weather events happen each year like I do now.
Yeah. I'm sorry, what was the question?
So the question is, how do we convey this message like right now, we're losing the battle on getting the message out there. We're losing the battle on convincing people that this is absolutely necessary immediately. The sense of urgency. We're not only losing the battle, the people that are battling and saying it's not at all urgent, that it's all hype, are literally winning in a sense. And we're literally 4 years away.
Yeah, you're putting your finger on the pulse of the problem, and shows like yours, which are getting the information out, are so essential. Now, all anyone needs to do is go to the primary research literature and look at the facts that are out there about what's happening with climate change. But even simpler, just look at what's happening in our culture. Why are all these billionaires and multinational corporations circling the Trump administration? Why are they so vigorously saying, no, there's no such thing as climate change? Well, if you can keep the people in fourth class, down in fourth class playing cards and watching Netflix, although I don't think they had Netflix on the Titanic. But if you can keep us down there distracted while you're getting in the lifeboats and gathering your resources, kind of doing what the wealthy have always done throughout history. What do? They build a castle and they gather as much of the crop as they can and they put it in their castle and they put a moat around the castle and they get some soldiers to defend what they've got. And those are the moves that we're seeing now. So if people are wondering what's really going on, just look at what's happening. That process is underway now. And it's, perhaps part of the answer to your question is we need to awaken the rebellious spirit that founded our nation and to start realizing that there's a concerted effort to keep us down in the fourth class steerage so that we don't figure out what's going on right now. If you were the elite, would you want the masses figuring out what's going on? No, of course not.
And I've always been a firm believer, like I'm saying it entirely different than you're saying. What I am saying is there is a concerted effort to be sure to it that there's this giant petri dish of underclass. And essentially in our education system, we created the greatest public education system in the world and we've decimated it over time. Now we no longer have the best education system in the world because of that, because really the affluent don't want a lot of more people to compete with. And like you said, they're really now we see the concentration of wealth. Like they are setting themselves up for success under extreme disaster. And those people in the fourth class are going to face that extreme disaster full head on with not much to work with. But I've never considered it 4 years away. Like you said, I do my very best, my due diligence to have this podcast and get the point out, to listen to everybody's point of view and try to come to a consensus of solutions. And it's not always easy to do because a lot of people don't agree on a lot of things, but I would have to agree with you. I would have to say what comes as a surprise to me is that it's 4 years away or 7 to 10 years away. And again, how do we get more people to come on board to Dr. to Dr. Christian Komor and understand that this is really urgent. I'm hoping you get elected because as governor, you've got a bigger bully pulpit as governor of a beautiful state like Colorado.
Right, right, right. Yep. You need those voices out there. And I'm sure, as anybody who's tried to, we often kind of fantasize that we have more power than we do. But when I've been at this for 15 years, and just as a private patriotic citizen and scientist, and it's very hard to get your voice out there unless you're a celebrity or ultra wealthy. It's very most likely that I would not win this campaign because we've got at least three people out there who are spending millions of dollars. I just checked our larder and we've got $4,000. Man, I'm a write-in candidate, so people actually will have to write me in because I couldn't afford the $700,000 it requires to have enough petitions to get on the ballot. I don't have $700,000. I'm sure a lot of your listeners don't.
No, I can assure you most of them, if not all of them, do not have $700,000 at hand.
Just to, yeah, spend them. So your question is right on the pulse. We need people to be alerted, but again, I don't like conspiracy. I cut my teeth as a psychologist years ago, back in the 80s, working at the nation's largest walled maximum security prison. And a lot of the prisoners were like, yeah, the whole system's against you and blah, blah. And I was definitely on the other side of that saying, well, no, we shouldn't just assume that everyone's against you. And so if anything, I'm an anti-conspiracy person, or I grew up that way. But it's very convenient to have people watching Netflix and kind of siloed in their houses the way people are now. We don't have the connectedness in society that we had in the 1930s and 1940s, and to bring people together. Hey, are you going to go fight? Joe down the streets joining up today. We just don't have a lot of that connectedness. But what we do still have is the vote. We have what Americans have fought for, which is our right to vote. So we need to get enough people out to vote. And frankly, I wish some other guy would come along right now and say, hey, I want to run for governor and create carbon capture and do all this stuff, because this is a lot of work and I'm losing a lot of money doing it. And it doesn't sound fun to me I'm not a power interested person. Being governor does not sound fun. It sounds like a lot of 5 a.m. wake up calls, and I don't like to get up early. So it sounds like a tough road to hoe, but I want my kid to grow up and have a world to grow up in. And I've seen incredibly beautiful, I know you and I were talking about that earlier, incredibly beautiful sunsets and storms and just animals, that herds of bighorn sheep, flocks of birds flying close to me. Nature is so incredible. This world is so incredible. It's such a gift. And to think that that our kids are going to be part of a transition which we'll end up losing. The earth has a certain carrying capacity, a number of humans that it can support. And on the order of, I don't do this kind of science, but 8 to 10 billion people. Because of climate change, by the time this century is out, we're going to be down to 2 to 3 billion that the planet will be able to support, because the environmental systems will have degraded to the point where they can't support more than that. Now, if we imagine a scenario where 7 billion people are being eliminated, that's a pretty horrible dystopian future that's coming up, and it's coming up this century. So the kids that are being born now, I've talked to a lot of people who are choosing not to have children because they've read the science and they see that it's just, when you know the facts, it's unavoidable at this point, unless we fight, which again was true in World War II. It was unavoidable. We had U-boats off our shores. We had balloon bombs floating in from Japan. We eventually would have lost this country also if we hadn't fought. But we know how to fight, and we can fight, and we just need to use the tool that we have, which is voting. And I'm not a big, hey, vote for me guy, but as things stand right now, if in Colorado you want to do something to fix this situation, you need to vote for me. And again, I wish it was some other guy. And if some other guy appears, I will hand the mantle over happily to that person. So, but yeah, I think we need to use the resource we have, which is voting.
Well, voting is a powerhouse, and awareness is a powerhouse. I ran for public office, and like you said, it was no fun. It was absolutely no fun for me at all.
Yeah.
I mean, it was horrific for me. So I'll be honest with you, as is governor, it's a big run. And really, it's magnified by the fact that for me, it was a big first time run. I ran for U.S. House of Representatives. I'm not even sure which is bigger, a governor of one of 50 states or a U.S. House of Representatives, 450 runs. And my thing is one of the things I used to say is, I'm not in this to raise money. I'm in this to raise awareness. And right there and then, anybody I spoke to thought I was just an idiot for coming to that sort of sense of mission. Let's talk about, one of my things was education. One of your things as governor of Colorado is education.
Yeah.
And climate was one of my things. Let's come to some agreements on climate. I thought President Obama had a good initiative with cap and trade on climate. Like you said, it may not be enough at this point. But cap and trade was essentially a big baby step forward.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been a believer that we don't know what tomorrow holds, but we all know who holds tomorrow. So I've always been big on education. And no matter whenever you push the buttons of education or climate, there's other things, you seem to almost find there's a lack of interest from even the most informed, from even the most open-minded. There seems to be some bigger agenda on their minds. Never climate or education. And there's other things that I think are significantly important. It's a source of frustration of mine. I've always made the point, I never thought as Tesla being the success story it is because it was electric cars. Bill Ford said it best, they were really fun to drive. And I don't think, and then Ford Motor ultimately went into electric cars in a big way and ultimately pulled back on it all and wrote down most of their investment on what they were going to do on they changed over their factories. They were going to go to electric, and now they're switching back to other things. And so we're up against a lot what the climate deadline. Let's just call it the climate deadline. We've got a deadline, whether it's 4 years, 7 years, or 10 years. Just changing mindsets is a significant task. Forget about taking action. That's the most concerning thing I'm getting from this conversation is, are we going to meet any of those deadlines? And I don't know that we are.
Well, that's where hopefully, if we can get to the point of this, we need to move this from, again, the first class passengers are very happy to have this remain a discussion, as if there was, the temperature at water boils, at which water boils is the temperature at which water boils. It's not a discussion. It's science. And there is such a thing as science. And we are able to gather information by using technology to know what's happening around us. That's one of the advantages we have. Of course, there's been a concerted effort to disable those sensors, those systems, that we can gather information by, but thank God it's too late. We have the information now. So we need to move things to the level where we're looking at this as infrastructure we're looking at this as, hey, we can, if we start gathering, if we look up in the sky and say, wow, there's a gold mine up there, which really there is. We have, when you start removing carbon from the atmosphere, we can, looking for some of my figures here, but we can, by 20, there'll be obviously startup costs involved with developing these plants, and they require energy, of course. So the idea is to site alternative energy around where the plants are, so we can, which is a less expensive way of doing it, so you don't have to pipe the energy to the plants. But eventually, we can have about $4 billion in revenue just for the state of Colorado in recovered CO2 products. So again, biodegradable plastic. If I just came out and said to people, hey, vote for me, I can solve the plastics problem. That should be enough to get anybody to vote for me.
On top of the fact, like you said, there's that $4 billion in revenue, not necessarily coming exclusively from plastics, but revenue is everything. If you could literally create a franchise opportunity for a lot of people to have this plastic solution, you're going to have a lot of ground to stand on as far as getting elected or as far as getting the point across that we need to do something like this.
Yep. That's kind of how if folks go to our website at K4GOV, K4GOV.com, we've got all the facts out there. And I always encourage people, check our facts. This is a huge operation, and I'm sure we got some things wrong. And I view it as a good thing when people come up and say, hey, you got this wrong, because then we just fix it.
It's not only that, but you're striking a chord. You're hitting a sense of interest. You're really hitting a nerve. People are interested in what you're putting out there. I'm very interested in what you're putting out there. I'm very interested in your gubernatorial campaign. And I would like to see you in, but like you said, you're up again, you're facing a Goliath. You're facing these giants, these people are funded in a big way. They're going to get billboards. They're going to get yard signs. They're going to get advertisement out there. It's another thing I've always worked on changing is getting the money out of politics. It's not easy, but we need more candidates like you, whether they prevail or not, to widen the amount of players that are out there.
Right. And to get people who've got so many people now are voting, especially now, by party. Well, if that happens in Colorado, we're in big trouble. There's a huge issue like this. You can't be thinking red or blue.
No,
you got to be thinking, who's going to help me survive? This is an election about survival. It's not an election about who's going to make our water less alkaline. This is a survival election.
And clearly, environmental concerns are a red or blue issue. But the fact of the matter is, it's not a lost issue. There's still plenty of red. There's still plenty of blue. There's still plenty of interest. I'm saying that this is still America where everybody has a vote. My hope is that podcasts like mine and candidacies like yours are going to turn the tide on the powerhouses out there.
I am completely in agreement.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to see where we won't be the powerful just because we're not looking to be the powerful, but our voices will be the powerful. The combination of efforts will be the powerful. The powerful are the ones that become president. Yeah, if you're the president, you can get onto a podium every day and convey your message. Whereas we're conveying our message in a smaller way, but we're really doing it.
Yep. And we got to just keep getting out there. And that's another thing people can do is people are often afraid to speak up and say, hey, I'm concerned about climate change. Make a t-shirt. That's easy enough to do nowadays. Put a yard sign out. says we need direct air carbon removal. Vote for Komor or whoever is going to get us that. Right now, it's just me. So you better vote for Christian Komor, and you better write that in and spell it correctly on the ballots. Otherwise, they will disqualify the vote. It is, like you said a few minutes ago, it's a digression, but the voting or the election system for candidates in our country has gotten perverted.
Oh, it's perverted's a good word. I was a writing candidate. That's where I want. I didn't give up. Like you said, I didn't have the money to buy on a ticket. I couldn't. The signatures for my particular run was over 4,000. I was at 100 a day, but the problem was it was a long day, and it didn't always meet that 100. And then, just like you said, the disqualification factor. Every petition had to have its I's dotted and its T's crossed. If they didn't have a voter registration card with them, they could do their birthday and their driver's license number. But if somebody reviewing that petition couldn't read a letter, so basically, long story short, 20% of the petitions were kicked back. So from 4,000, we went to 4,800. And really, you could just assume 5,000. And I was sitting out in front of the DMV every day and getting to that point where if I was at 70, I would go out to a shopping center after they closed and try to get the other 30. But it's almost cheaper to pay the 10 grand in my particular instance, the amount of time and the amount of work I was missing trying to get the signatures. My point was if I can't get signatures, nobody's going to know who the hell I am. But and when you say perverted, if you sign on, if you make an alliance with a big company or something and do what they ask when you get there, it's entirely you're going to wind up on the ballot. You may very well win just because of that.
Yep. So hopefully we can, at least this election, we can rise above those dynamics. And but it will take it'll take a grassroots, it'll take a rising up of people saying, hey, yeah, this is an existential danger. And I want my kids, that's how I think of it, is kids and grandkids. I'm 67. Oh my God. And I won't be around to suffer as all this comes down. I'll be in a nursing home somewhere eating Jello.
Well, you don't know. You could make it to 90 and still walk around the neighborhood smiling and saying hi and raising awareness. You don't really know.
Right. Never give up.
I don't ever give up, but I don't want to. I like what I do. I love what I do. I'll never run for office again, and I know what do I say? I don't know. I have a feeling you may not either, just because it's a drag. It's really not. It was never for me, and I don't think it's for everybody. But there is an organization run for something. The independent movement is huge at this moment in time in our history. It's bigger than ever. I think we're going to see more independents get elected significantly every 2 years, every cycle, more and more, because it is red or blue, but that's really changing over time. But over time, the independent movement is getting bigger and bigger. I interview a lot of independents, and they have a lot of great ideas. That's always what we're doing. We're not debating your ideas, whether you are a Republican or whether you are a Democrat or whether you're an open-minded, or not necessarily Republicans and Democrats are an open-minded. If you're just an independent that wants to have various different views, not necessarily align yourself with one party view, it's that momentum's growing, and that will change too. My biggest concern is learning more about what you're offering because of the deadline.
Yes, you again have hit the nail on the head. That's really the key. In fact, it says on my notes here, the one point that we have to get across is the deadline, because people absolutely don't know that. And in the polling, what's appeared is a very strange pattern where 10 years ago, Americans were by and large saying we don't really need to worry about climate change. It was 17th or 23rd down the list of concerns. Now the polling is saying it's too far gone. We can't do anything. So it went from we can't do anything it's not really a problem to, it's such a big problem, but we give up and roll over.
In the sense that that's not because there is an acknowledgement that it is a big problem, which is the problem was we didn't acknowledge it was a big problem when we had more time. But at least there is an acknowledgement that it's a big problem now. But like,
Right.
but your timeline is 4 years away. And does anything ever happen in 4 years? Generally speaking, not a lot.
Correct. This will be a Hail Mary.
Right.
But
And I'm all for that because, again, I'm a positive person. I'm always in the viewing positive people. We don't, not looking for debate. I'm not looking for argument. I'm not always looking for intellectual, technically correct answers. I'm looking for wisdom. I'm looking for understanding. I'm looking for solutions. And this is your idea of at least addressing carbon emissions to start and make it an immediate concern, to make it an immediate something we address immediately in a big way. I want to spread that word. So I'm on board with you, Christian. And I think your message is clear. And I think you'll do very well in getting that message out there and convincing more and more people. We can't just focus on the fact that we may miss the deadline. We got to focus on the fact that we may hit it.
I love how you said that. Yes. Yes, that needs to be our focus is we can, at this point, we can do this.
We can do it.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, not to quote Obama, but yes, we can.
When we go to watch a movie or some heroic television show, we want to see a Hail Mary. We want to see someone who's fighting against big odds and winning. Well, I can't think of bigger odds than these odds, and I can't think of a bigger win. We can flip this. If things go the way we need them to go, people are going to look pretty silly with their fortresses in Greenland and trying to find water on Mars. And it'll be the little guy, the common folks, us guys from fourth class, who are really the heroes here.
And everybody loves when an underdog pulls it out. Chris, this has been incredible. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to doing it again. We never let a guest go. I like to say, once you're in, we're gonna email you and get you back on and see how it's going.
Okay.
We never.
That'd be great. We're still months away from voting, so.
And then comes, I mean, like you said, you don't know if you can win this, but you're still going to stay engaged. So I want to stay in touch with you even past the election cycle.
Yeah, next week we're going out. We're going to be pounding in yard signs. Even though here in Colorado there's pretty strict regulations, so most of them will get torn down. But we're gonna be putting up signs and stuff, getting the word out.
I'm really enthusiastic about this, Chris, and I'm going to stay in touch with you. I really appreciate you taking the time. If you want to talk about a website, we can visit more and get to know you better. Definitely put that up. Mention that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Christian Komor. Thank you so much, candidate for Colorado governor, independent candidate, and a write-in candidate. And I give that a lot of props because that was me at one point. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.